All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about within Graphing 101 here is domain and range. So domain applies to the x values. Range applies to the y values. Now, should look very similar because it's the same model that I use for discrete versus continuous. But if I had this set up and I was looking at a discrete model, my domain and range would follow from what's here. Okay, so remember, I'm just looking at the scenario of the max you could buy is 10 candy bars for $5. So it's a 2 for 1. So 2 candy bars, $1. So if that's the case, the domain, the x values that work, would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So what I would say is that we can be between 1 and 10. Now, actually we could put 0 here. Now, since I can buy 0 candy bars, I can say, okay, it could be equal to 0. Since I could buy 10 candy bars, it could be equal to 10. All right, so that's all the domain would be in this case. Now, if we were looking at the math model, something that goes all the way across in that line, that we'll talk about here in a second. That's not this one. So for the range for what we've talked about would be $5, and it would start at $0. So we would say that our y values range from $0, and you could not pay anything, so 0. And notice that we're going to put y in the middle this time. And our highest value was $5. So what we're saying here is, for your range, you're somewhere between 0 and 5. For your domain, or for your x values, you're somewhere between 0 and 10. So if we had this situation, that's what our domain and range would be. Now let's say that we take a look at the math. So we connect all of these. It goes in both directions. We understand that that line means that anything that we're talking about, any point that exists between 2 points is another point. So there's a point here, there's a point here, there's a point here, there's a point there. So this whole line is just a big series of points. Well, counting all of those, or even making a range like this, is gonna be kind of a bummer, because we're talking about the arrows going in both directions. So that means it continues forever in this direction. I got an arrow going this way. So my math model is saying that it's going to continue on forever in this direction. So how do I talk about domain and range? Well, this is where linear equations, we don't really talk about domain and range so much, because your x, or your domain values, are any real numbers. So any numbers that are real, doesn't matter, positive infinity, negative infinity, anything on that scale is going to be your domain. Same thing for the y values, because it continues in both directions. Okay, so all of these values are included, and then it just keeps going. So all of our y values are also included. So we would say that y is equal to all real numbers. So when we're talking about domain and range, it doesn't really apply, and this symbol, by the way, means all real numbers. Okay. So it doesn't really apply when we're talking about linear equations, which is something that you've kind of learned, and we'll keep learning more about as we go this year. So domain and range, when there is context, we're talking about what values work. When there's mathematical context, and we're talking about a linear equation, you're not going to have that same effect.